guys, so in today's video we're going to take inspiration from Nelly Korda, and I'll be honest with you, my wife has recently got into golf, and some of you may have watched some of the videos on her other channel, Married to Golf. If you haven't, definitely consider heading over there and subscribing, because watching her journey and her progression is really, I think, relatable for lots of people, and it's also very enjoyable for myself seeing her progress. But she'll often cite Nelly Korda. So Anna will quite often sort of talk about Nelly Korda's golf swing, and she'll show me glimpses. And obviously she's doing something really well because she can't stop winning. And one of the things that I thought we would talk about, because it's something that I haven't really spoken about quite recently on the channel, is the wrist move coming in towards the impact phase. So just to clarify a couple of positions here, let's say your impact phase is from sort of parallel through to parallel here, right? So we've got the sort of early downswing, which is left arm horizontal, and then from here to here is that sort of impact phase in terms of when we're going to start to, really get a sensation of the club hitting the ball. And what we can really notice with Nelly Korda is the wrist positions. So she has a decent amount of right wrist hinge, which means this type of angle here. We can also see the way that the left wrist is flexed, and the club face looks, shall we say, more parallel towards, perpendicular towards her plane line. So this means as she comes down into this hit, the club face stays much more stable, and then she has a sort of what we class as a bit more of a sort of slap release to square the face, and it means there's not too much rolling happening at the bottom part of the swing. Now, is this important? Yes, I think it is, because there's a handful of students that I know and that I work with online that in the downswing position they come down and the wrist is slightly cupped. And the problem is when your left wrist is cupped, one, it's going to have a tendency to open the club face, but two, it's going to make you come down a little bit too steep, like so. So you can see if I now change this wrist position into a more flexed, what we can see is the way the club head goes more behind me, okay, like so. And then if we kind of move the wrist and help it with a little bit of wrist extension to get the club on plane, you can start to see the way that club face looks much, much squarer. Now, the other side of this is that, I wouldn't necessarily try and force a huge contortion, right? To the point where I see this a lot from students as well, where they end up sort of letting go of the club, right? We don't necessarily want to do that. But I think what you do want to do to get a nice solid contact on the back of the golf ball is you want to make sure as you're coming into this downswing position that you feel like your left wrist is nice and flat. And I think the best way to ensure that you do that is to try and be a little bit more aware of retaining that wrist hinge in that downswing position. So what I do with all of my students is we go through a bit of a swing sequence where we get set up to the golf ball. In the early part of the backswing position, we create an element of wrist hinge. So you can see the way the club head travels back in the first part of the swing through a wrist hinge, not through like a massive amount of body rotation. And then we hold on to this wrist hinge as I come into the downswing. The wrist hinge angle, similar to what we saw with Nelly, helps you keep the club nicely on plane. My left wrist will be nice and flat at this stage as well. And then you can hold on to that sensation of that wrist hinge until you come into this impact phase. And then once the club shaft is parallel, then you want to start to be more aware of allowing that club to release, allowing that right wrist to flatten out so that you can keep that face nice and square coming in towards that through swing. So get rid of that cupped left wrist, 100%. You can play around with that release. Make sure that wrist is nice and hinged from that early backswing position, and you'll notice much, much better contacts. See you soon.